happened. Steve Tisch and I met after the game yesterday and agreed to talk this morning, which we did. And we agreed that wholesale changes needed to be made to this organization to get us back to the team that we expect to be. And we also agreed that it was pointless to wait any longer to make these changes. I met with Jerry Reese approximately 10:30 this morning. And that's as difficult a meeting as I've ever had. Jerry's been here since 1994. He is homegrown, started out as a part-time scout and rose all the way through the ranks to become our general manager and to become the general manager for 2 Super Bowl teams. I thanked him on behalf of Steve and myself for everything he's done for this organization. I told him that I have no doubt that he will get another shot with another franchise, and that at some point in time I'm going to be answering questions from people about why I got rid of him in the first place. I then met with Kevin Abrams and asked him to serve as our interim general manager for the rest of the season, and if he chooses to be a candidate for the full-time position, Kevin agreed to do that. Then met with Ben McAdoo and thanked him for everything he has done for us, for all of his hard work, for the professional manner in which he's conducted himself. I also feel that he will be a successful head coach at some point in the future. I think he's going to learn from his experience here, and he'll go on and be a successful head coach. Both of these men, contrary to what their public persona is sometimes, have been complete professionals here. They always make decisions looking out for what they believe is in the best long-term interest of the franchise. They never complain about anything. They don't politic around the office. They communicate well with one another, and that's something that I'm very grateful to both of them for. I met with Steve Spagnuolo after these meetings, asked him to serve as the interim head coach and also to be a candidate to be the head coach after the season if he chooses to do so. He agreed to do that. I then met with all the assistant coaches and told them that my expectation is for them to continue to work hard and to get these players ready to play these last 4 games. I told them that I would not put up with any talk in this building about tanking or anything else, that I expected us to go out and try to win these games, and I expected their best efforts to try to get us to do that. In terms of our general manager search, that starts right away. I have asked Ernie Accorsi to serve as a consultant in this process. He's agreed to do that, and so we expect to get started right away on that. Ideally, you'd like to have the general manager in place first before the head coach. That's not always going to be the case, but I think that would be the ideal scenario. So with that, I will entertain some of your questions. I don't think there was any one final straw. I just think that the where we are as a franchise right now, we're 2-10. We've kind of been spiraling out of control here. I just felt like we needed a complete overhaul. I don't think there was any one event or one final act that precipitated that.
How much did the whole Eli situation play into that?
Really had no effect whatsoever. 2-10 is 2-10, and obviously, the public reaction to that was not pleasant, but that really didn't have any effect on our decision.
John, have you spoken to Steve, and does he intend to go back to Eli as the starting quarterback?
I've spoken to Steve, and he's still trying to come to grips with this whole thing. He wants to talk to his offensive staff, and then he's going to talk to Kevin and myself. Ultimately, it's going to be his decision as to who to play at quarterback.
John, are you embarrassed in general with what's happened to the franchise this season?
Of course I'm embarrassed. 2-10, there's no defense for that, particularly when expectations were so high. And I understand that, listen, we've had a ridiculous number of injuries. It's the first time in my life that I think I sat at a game having to constantly look at the flip card to try to determine who we were playing. But that being said, we still started out 0-5 with relatively healthy roster until that 5th game when all the wide receivers got hurt. So, yeah, I'm embarrassed about that, and that's one of the reasons I'm standing here.
John, are you committed still to personnel and head coaching, or can one person kind of?
My very strong preference is to maintain that traditional separation, but again, I would never say never if the right candidate was there.
Do you regret not intervening? It seems like the plan to move Gino and the quarterbacks was not right. You guys were not right.
I mean, we were and we weren't. I mean, Ben came up with the plan. I initially signed off on the plan. My hope had been to talk to him to try to have a little more flexibility with it, not have a hard and fast time when he was going to come out of the game. But by then, Eli rightfully had rejected the notion of only starting and playing a half and coming out, and we had issued the statement, and it was just too late at that point.
Did you consider firing Ben
No.
on Wednesday?
No.
You put a statement out 3 weeks ago saying there wouldn't be any changes, so how do you explain 3 weeks later making?
I changed my mind. We changed our minds. I mean, given that all of the events that have occurred, where we are as a franchise right now, and to be honest with you, it became more and more apparent that we were going to have to do something at the end of the season. So we talked after the game and again this morning about why prolong it any longer. Why not just get it done now? I'm very conscious of the fact that 3 of our last 4 games are at home. I was conscious of having lived through it before, of what the reaction was going to be. It also gives us somewhat of a tactical advantage in allowing us to start looking at general managers right now rather than waiting until the end of the season.
John, there was a period of time between, let me rephrase this, were you aware before Ben went to Eli and said, you're going to start, and Gino was going to second half, were you aware of that before he actually presented the plan?
That seems to be the focus of everybody's attention right now. And the plan was Ben was going to talk to Eli, tell him that he was going to play the first half, that Gino would play the second half. I signed off on that. But again, my hope was 2 things. One, that I was going to speak to Ben and try to get him to be a little bit more flexible about that, although I do not like interfering with coaching decisions about who's going to play, and I've never done that before. I also, as I said, I think the other day to you guys, was hoping that Eli would be playing so well that it'd be impossible to take him out. In any event, it is where it is, and you ought to stop blaming Ben and Jerry on that. If you want to blame anybody for that, blame me, because I certainly had the power to overrule it if I wanted to. I chose not to do it.
There are reports that Eli will start this week again.
There's no decision, to my knowledge, that's been made on that yet. I assume he'll run it by me before he makes that decision.
John, obviously it's been a coaching decision, but
I'll come back.
do you believe that the coaching staff will keep the promise to give Davis Webb an opportunity at any point in these last 4 games?
I mean, I'm hopeful that at some point he gets into the game, but right now, to be honest with you, after all this losing, I'm just as focused on trying to win some of these games as anything else.
John, a year ago, you were on your way to 11 wins, and Ben was a possible Coach of the Year candidate. Your roster was viewed as talented and one where smart decisions had been made in free agency. How did all of this go wrong so quickly?
That's a good question, one that we're trying to figure out right now. I was very confident about this roster, as I think most of the people in this room were heading into this season. I thought it was as talented a roster as we've had here in a long time. We were coming off an 11-5 season. Our defense was basically the same. Our offense was supposed to be better. We had added, some receivers and a couple of tight ends. We were supposed to be better. We got off to a very poor start on offense. Our defense did not play as well as they could have, and then everybody got hurt. It's really, and I've used this expression before, it's really been the perfect storm this year. Everything that could have gone wrong has gone wrong so far this season, and it's just one of those things you have to live through and suck it up and make whatever changes you have to make and go on.
You've never
How
really
much
been
did
through this
Jerry's
process.
commitment to your offensive line as it stood, how much did that ultimately cost him?
Well, it's more where we are as a team right now. It wasn't that specific a thing. Listen, we had pretty much the same offensive line last year, and even though our offense was not particularly, good last year, it was good enough to win 11 games. We thought that group would take a step forward this year, and even now, I mean, half of them have gotten hurt, and it's just been an impossible situation.
John, you're talking about at this time of this age now, people talk about
about communication. You know, you mentioned it with the baseball rules and everything. How important is it for GM, especially head coach, better communication skills with players, with everybody in the building that you've had here before?
Well, first of all, this particular, I mean, Ben and Jerry Reese communicated together very well, and Jerry and I communicated very well together. I usually don't have that much interaction with the head coach because I like that to be the general manager's, because that's always been the way I've done it. Jerry communicated very well with players. One of the things that I liked about him the most is he was not afraid to call a player out when he didn't feel like he was playing up to his potential. And Ben, I thought, communicated pretty well. Listen, I've spoken to players over the past few weeks, a handful of them, to try to get a handle on whether guys were quitting or whether they weren't playing hard, and that was not the message that I got back. That people felt that they still were playing hard, and for most of the season, with an exception of a couple of games that I can think of, I thought guys did play hard.
You've never really been through this process with the general manager. Do you feel like there has to be a total front office overall? I mean, how can a keep the staff?
Well, I think that's going to be largely up to the new GM, and you know, we did go through this back in '07 when Jerry was hired, and we kept most of the people, and I'm not anticipating there being wholesale changes, but again, that's going to be largely up to the new general manager.
John, would you necessarily shy away from hiring a new head coach that maybe didn't have the experience going forward?
Not necessarily. It just depends on the candidate. I mean, there are a number of new head coaches that are very successful in this league this year, so you can't shy away from them. If you think you have the right guy, you got to go for it.
John,
Where do you think it went
John,
wrong?
there's an expression, the giant way. How do you tell the fans that you haven't lost your way during this turbulent season?
Well, listen, Bruce, we've had an embarrassing season. I think most people that know me know how painful that is to me, and you know how committed I am to trying to put a winning team back on the field. I mean, you know, I know our fans are suffering, but I'm suffering more, I guarantee you that right now. And I have gotten to the point where, or we've gotten to the point where we just felt like we had to make wholesale changes, and that's what we've done.
John, for Spags, moving forward, for Spags to be a candidate for the permanent head coaching job, will ultimately, I'm assuming that decision will lie in the hands of who the new GM is?
Well, I mean, you know, Steve and I have the final say on any head coaching decision, but that's going to be largely dependent on what the new general manager has to say, yes.
With Ben, you know, he had one good year, made the playoffs, one obviously very bad year. Where do you think it went wrong for him somewhere in the middle?
As I said, I think it just ended up being the perfect storm for us. We got off to a bad start this year, particularly on offense. Our defense didn't play as well as they played last year. We had leads in a few games that last year they would have held and we would have won the game. They didn't do that early on. Then everybody got hurt. And listen, there are certain guys on this roster that aren't playing as well as they should be playing right now. And you know, we all bear the responsibility for that.
Then you communicated well, and you talk to guys who say they didn't quit. So I'm missing the point. What is it? Is it just the record, or was there other things?
Our team isn't good enough. It's obviously not good enough. We're 2-10.
John, just a timetable question. Do you expect to hire a new GM before the end of the season?
That's possible. If the right candidate comes along, that's possible. Obviously, if we want to talk to somebody who's currently employed, then we would have to wait.
You don't have names, do you have names in mind? Or?
We have names in mind, but I'm not going to go into individual names right now.
John, you worried that there was talk about evolution, not revolution. You look back now, do you regret that? Did there need to be a revolution at that time?
I don't think so. I mean, you know, that's semantics. I mean, I thought he was the right guy for the job. We were 11-5 last year. Everything looked great back in September, and then it's all fallen apart. And we'll obviously hire the best general manager we can and be very guided by what he has to say.
Do you regret not doing this the last 3 months ago? You thought you were going to be head player.
Yes, I have to tell you, I've been around long enough not to get shocked by many things, but I certainly did not see this coming.
Do you regret not doing this last week just to avoid some of the backlash you had?
No.
How do you handle the draft process right now? You're going to have a very important draft pick coming up, and discover you're general manager. If you don't have that new GM in, how do you plan on?
Well, we'll have the GM in long before the draft, And, our scouts and Mark Ross, our head of scouting, are it's business as usual for them. They're going to keep doing what they're doing. But that GM will be in place long before the draft.
John, was there any thought given considering injuries? Nobody can plan for that, obviously, that's not the head coach's fault. Was there any pause about maybe saying, okay, maybe we give Ben another shot, or, given some of these things were out of his, control?
That certainly was something we considered, but at the end of the day, we still felt like wholesale changes needed to be made.
John, the last time you hired...
I'll come back to you.
The last time you hired a coach and general manager in the same year was 1979. And I know there was some disagreement between your father and your uncle on, the way to go about it, who to hire first. Is it a given here that you will hire the general manager first and you will let him have input, if not final say?
In all likelihood, that'll be the way it occurs, Gary, but I don't ever want to say that there's a guarantee of that, but in all likelihood, that'll be what happens.
And the other question I have, you made references before about the last 4 games at home. How much of the timing of doing it now rather than waiting until the end of the season plays off of what happened last week and the fan reaction last week, and not want to subject Ben to fan reaction, or not want to subject your organization to the anticipated fan reaction?
Well, listen, I was certainly cognizant of what the fan reaction was likely to be over the last 4 weeks, but that wasn't the final determining factor. We just reached a point where we felt that, we're going to be making these changes probably at the end of the season, so what's the point in prolonging this any further?
Yeah, I was just curious how your evaluation of leadership, particularly, the leader of men in the locker room and things like that will change and be modified after this particular example.
Well, if I understand your question correctly, listen, I do think we need some more leadership in the locker room for sure, but I think in terms of our priorities as an organization right now, let's go out and find the best general manager, and then let's take it from there.
John, when you talk about injuries, obviously, the loss of Odell seemed to be devastating to this team and this offense. How do you look at him and his future? I mean, you're the one guy now who's up close to him and a decision maker here now that Jerry has.
I mean, I certainly expect him to be a part of this team in the future, but that'll be a discussion also with the incoming general manager, the incoming head coach, and we'll make whatever decision we think is appropriate going forward. One more.
What were Jerry and Ben's reactions? Were either of them shocked?
I don't think either one of them were shocked. I think they could not have been more professional. They both thanked me for the opportunity. I mean, my meeting with Jerry was a little more emotional, just because we have a longer history together and because he's meant so much to this organization. I've talked to him a couple of times this morning, and he thanked me for the opportunity that we've given him, for everything we've done for his family. I thanked him for everything he's done here, and that was not an easy meeting for me, and it was not for him either. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that was John Mara, the president and CEO of the New York Giants, talking about the decision to fire Ben McAdoo and Jerry Reese, the head coach and GM, respectively. Trey Wingo, Tim Hasselbeck, Jeff Saturday, and Louis Riddick is here as well. Guys, let's go through quickly the highlights, if you will, or the lowlights, for lack of a better term, considering how this all played out. A couple things stood out for me. One, Steve Spagnuolo, the new interim head coach, will decide whether or not Eli Manning is going to start this weekend, even though Jordan Renan, our Giants reporter, has already said that he will be back to the starting quarterback.